Our next speaker is going to be talking about a much needed topic that needs to be talked about. So, many of the speakers spoke about the different domains of design, the different aspects of design, and while all those aspects, continue to advance and evolve, there is one topic, one aspect where the industry is still sorely lacking in the understanding on how to engender trust in both the solutions that we put forth, but also internally within the very teams where the great design is expected. So trust can be unfortunately scarce on quite a few multiple levels, and that's why we have today Michael Chanover, who is the VP, Vice President of Design at Khan Academy, one of the leading edtech platforms, where he oversees design's role in providing a free world-class education for anyone, everywhere. Sounds like a dream job to have, Michael. Prior to joining Khan Academy, Michael served as the Vice President of Design and UX at NerdWallet, where he led a team of 40 professional designers, researchers, and writers across product design, research, and brand. So let's have a big round of applause for Michael Chanover.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Michael. Thank you so much for having me. And so I'm going to talk today about designing for trust. And the reason I'm going to talk about this is that as I have been doing this for a while, I have come to observe what I think is a really fascinating relationship between the extent to which trust can live in a product and a solution that we experience as users and the role that trust plays within that organization where that product is made. And so on the surface, it makes a lot of sense. How could one effectively design for trust if trust is not living and breathing within the organization itself? Yet as a community of designers, I sometimes see us not get this quite right. I see us focus on things that are a lot of things other than candor, honesty, and ultimately trust. And so going further, why do I care? I care for the same reason that we all care. I care for the same reason that we're all here. I care deeply about the impact design can make. I care deeply about what design can do to change the world and to make the world better. And I believe that many of our efforts have actually been quite successful. I believe that design in many ways has never been this sophisticated. I believe that design has never been this valued. This number, 21,476, that's the number of open roles listed on Glassdoor for design in the United States alone. Those are open roles. That is a staggering number. And so what that says to me is we have an enormous opportunity. The time is now. This is ours. And so let's go this extra step and let's really understand what it means to create incredible products with incredible people that are trustful. And so more good news, this is what we do. This is how we will do it. The same practices that we use as designers to create trust within our solutions are the same ones that we'll use to create trust within our organizations itself. And so with that, let's get into some concrete ideas. I am going to, however, first ask that we start with a warm-up. And so credit to Joe Gebbia of Airbnb. He used this warm-up, and so I'd like everyone to please take your devices out. Thank you. And unlock them. Everyone knows where this is going. Now, hand it to the person next to you. Now, let's collectively and effectively sit with that for a minute. How does that feel to everyone? Right? Exactly, right? And yet, is this not what we as designers, okay, you may now give your phones back. Yes, now that the beads of sweat have stopped pouring down the foreheads. Is that feeling that we all just very palpably had of uncertainty, of unknowing, is that feeling not what we as designers are in fact dealing with every single day when we design these solutions that capture your most private and sensitive conversations in email, your health records, your bank account number, photographs of your family and children? So much sensitive information is ultimately being asked to be trusted by consumers as a result of us. And so this is why I'm here. This is what is important. And so now let's get into the mechanics of it, shall we? We're going to talk about these 4 areas: defining trust. What does it really mean? How do you design for it? What are some of the levers that we may all pull? How do you ultimately measure for it, which I'll share a little bit more as a provocation today. And then finally, how to manage the life cycle of trust over time, as it is an evolving and constantly changing thing. And so we're going to do this through the lens of our internal partners and through the lens of our external users. And so with that, I'm going to start by telling a story inspired by someone who used to work for me, a design manager named Nat Bolton, about something that I know at least some of us love to trust, and that is sushi. And so many of us know this is a California roll, not using this because it's my home state, but because in addition to being super tasty, what is so interesting to me about the California roll, it is in many ways the product, if you will, that engendered enough trust in Americans such that Americans fell in love with sushi. And so how did it do this? As the story goes, apparently back in the 1970s, some very savvy chefs in Los Angeles used, in our parlance, iterative design and user experience insights to learn some things that ultimately made this California roll seem trustworthy. And so one was the look of awe that fell upon customers' faces when they realized that the fish they had just ordered was raw. And so the iteration was made to substitute a less known, less trusted ingredient like raw fish with something more known and more trusted like cooked crab and avocado. The second iteration was the understanding that nori, the seaweed that surrounds some rolls of sushi, was similarly not yet known, not yet trusted, not yet understood. It, on many plates, returned to the kitchen as the slimy band untouched. And so that let these chefs understand that their opportunity was to take this product and make it inside out. The nori is now hidden on the inside of the sushi where you can't see it, where you don't have to wonder. And so in many ways, the California roll was what we could think of as the minimum viable product, or the minimum viable sushi, if you will, where the viability came as a result of the presence of trust. And so you know how the story goes. As Americans got assured over time, Americans became more and more comfortable trying different kinds of sushi, including ones with nori on the outside, including ones with raw fish, and that ultimately led to the leap, which is a now very known dish to have when you're out for dinner, this kind of sushi. And so what does this funny fish tale tell us about the nature of trust? And so going back to our task at hand, it tells us a few things as we're talking about how do you ultimately define trust. It tells us, one, that trust is an ongoing, fluid relationship, that it changes over time. Like Americans' love for sushi, what was untrusted one day will be, and perhaps could be, trusted the next day. And I think as we all well know, the opposite, of course, is true too. What is trusted today may not be trusted tomorrow. There's many, many examples of this that we can all easily think of. It also tells us, interestingly, that trust cannot exist without risk. That to trust something, you have to accept the possibility of failure. You have to have a certain amount of vulnerability at stake in order to have something ultimately trusted. And that thirdly, if we break this down into even more elements, it tells us that to enable trust, we're ultimately solving for trustworthiness and assurance. And so I'll give a little bit of an explanation in terms of what those are. And so trustworthiness does not require the element of time. Trustworthiness happens almost immediately. Trustworthiness is a bit akin to the look and feel. And so continuing on our sushi metaphor, here's what I mean. Imagine you step into a restaurant, and this is what you see. You're hungry for dinner, you decide on sushi. Chances are you'd probably feel pretty good about sitting down, ordering food, and eating it. It seems trustworthy. It looks the part. It seems like it should be a good experience, and so you trust it. Now imagine, on the contrary, it's 1 in the afternoon, you're hungry, you're turning the corner, and you see this bad boy. You would probably think twice, if not 3 times, before ordering sushi from a gas station. Gas station sushi. I just love saying it. And so that is the difference between that is essentially what trustworthiness is. It's the difference between sushi you order from a restaurant that looks the part versus sushi that you might order from a gas station. And so similarly, if we look at this through the lens of people and our teams and the ways that we all work together, what are the cues that signal trustworthiness within your organization? If you understand them, you can design for them and you can architect around them. And so continuing on, if trustworthiness is what you get at the outset, and assurance is what comes as a result of the experience. It happens over time. And so, for example, back to our sushi metaphor, even if the restaurant looks great, you go in, you have a wonderful meal, that night you don't feel well and you get sick from the food, the chances are you will not be assured and you will not have an easy time trusting that place over time. And that similarly, we all know this is true with the teams that we work with. If you have a continually poor relationship with a coworker or a team or a fill in the blank, the chances are over time you will lose trust. Trust will not continue. And so on a side note, I have to say, I know Lee's gas and sushi looks entirely photoshopped. It's not. It's a real place in Memphis. And according to Yelp, although they're clearly challenged by the trustworthiness, they're doing pretty well on the assurances. And so now that we know what these components are, trustworthiness and assurance, let's talk about how to make them a little bit more concrete. And so 4 ways that I do this are through the lenses of value, communication, authenticity, and collaboration. These are 4 that I've consistently found work well. And so I'll talk about each one of these. And so ultimately, to instill trust and to design for trust, be valuable. It sounds so obvious, and yet it's so important. Understand what value is and deliver it. And so one example of how I've done this within organizations I've been a part of is measure what is valuable. I had a CEO tell me once, you get what you measure. I think that's actually quite true. And so understand what your design team's definition of value is to yourself and to the organization, and communicate that out. Tie it up with your organization's objectives and key results, OKRs, and measure what is valuable. Another way to do this is to your users. Again, it sounds obvious, but the same goes true. Deliver value to the products, deliver value through the products that are reaching your customers in a way that makes sense. And so at Khan Academy, we strive to create a world-class education for anyone, anywhere. That feels like a pretty valuable thing to me. It feels like a pretty valuable thing to the millions of teachers and students who use us. And so that's another way of saying deliver value. And then, of course, show what is valuable. Go one step deeper. And in this case, this is a dashboard that we use to communicate to teachers where some students are within their journey toward mastery. Understand what your customers want, understand what they see as valuable, and help make it easy for them to see that and get that. Continuing on, be clear, deliver clarity. Clarity is not just about having really nice slides and sending emails without typos. It's about communicating effectively. And so clarity is a way that helps people see us as trustworthy and valuable over time. And another great way to do this is ask the question, why? And so this is, to me, one of the most powerful tools in a designer's toolbox. Why? I've had many, many conversations like this. We want to do something. Why? Well, because it's going to help. Okay, help what? Help how much? I don't really know. Maybe not that much. Okay, maybe that's not the thing to do. And so force these conversations by asking why and seeking clarity. You'll inspire your team to understand that you really want to know what the problems are that you're being asked to solve and how success is going to be measured. What does it ultimately look like when we solve them? And so if you don't understand, take the opportunity to ask and then call that out. Another way to do this is to actually force clarity by asking someone what are the top 3 important things that anyone's working on in a given day, in a given week, in a given month. It is the difference between we're fixing all the things that are broken versus we're clearly focusing in these areas. This, with clarity, is what we're investing our time in, and this is how we're going to do it. And then similarly, for customers, you wouldn't trust someone who is hiding something from you. Be clear. Be clear around some things like how you make money, or what will you do with your customers' data. In this example, this is a website called The Points Guy that helps people understand what to do with different points that they aggregate through airlines and hotels and whatnot. And in their mobile view, front and center is their advertising disclosure. The exact answer to the question of, how are you guys influenced, by the way, by the products that are advertising on your platform? That's how. And so that shows that you've got nothing to hide and instills trustworthiness within your users. Okay, in this next area, this is a really passionate and interesting one to me too. Be authentic. And so authenticity is an incredibly important way to help people see you as trustworthy because it allows them to see you for really what you are and to be real. And so in this example, a little grainy, sorry, this is a product from a company called SY Partners, also located in the Bay Area. They're called superpower cards, and what you could do is go through and identify what designer archetype, if you will, are you, what is your superpower? And so by understanding as a designer what your superpower is, you're also understanding what your superpower is not, and you're thereby getting to really understand who you are and who you're not and what you do. And that similarly to design for authenticity, share it. I like things like user manuals where I could describe to people, this is what motivates me. These are my triggers. Here's how I get inspired. Here's how I want to be communicated to, or here's what I look for when I look for great design. Similarly, with team charters, put down on paper who you are, what you stand for, who is the real you as an organization or as a design team. That is a way to engender authenticity. And then lastly, a way that I love to do this and other people do is through the work itself. These are real people. Use real people in your work. Use your team, your employees, your actual customers. By creating a sense of authenticity through the work with real people, you'll help people understand what it is you do and how to trust you. This is, of course, the now legendary Dove Real Beauty campaign where they're using real people of all shapes and sizes, and they're similarly vowing to not Photoshop out anyone's realness, anyone's authenticity. And so lastly, be collaborative. So here's a really interesting thing about design to me. It's almost never done alone. We almost never do design alone. We always partner with, whether it's a hardware manufacturer or a software engineer or a product manager or lots of other roles. And then similarly, it's usually not for us. Yes, we can be the users of the products we make, but they're ultimately for a lot of other people. And so it is so important to be collaborative in how you both make your products for your users and with your teams. And so here's a great way of seeing this work in the past. Credit goes to Mike Peng, managing director and partner at IDEO. This is called the Four Corners exercise, where imagine you have 4 designs that you're evaluating, put a design in each corner of the room, and then ask people to go to the corner where the design that they think is the best design lives. Ask them to argue for it. Ask them to describe what it is about it that makes it great. Then switch corners. And you'll find designers are in that position of having to describe things about the concept that they don't think is the best one that are great. It's an amazing forcing function to create a sense of diversity in the conversation and really that sense of collaboration where people are understanding how the others were thinking and how the others are working. This is an interesting one, and it actually took me a long time to really understand this as a professional. Lean into the tensions. And that means identify what might be a bit of a trigger and name it. And when you do that, you have the opportunity to do what I think of as the real ninja move and that turn it into growth. And so I once had a conversation where I said, it sounds like everyone gets tense every time we talk about budget. Why is that? Am I imagining it? And if not, let's talk about it. I learned that certain people on the team were insecure about what they knew with respect to budgets or how it worked. And so by leaning into tensions, you can understand where those lay and how to turn them into growth. And then, of course, lastly, collaborate with your users. Come up with inventive ways to include users in your process. Move beyond showing very polished and pretty prototypes to people in labs at the very, very end. Bring people in for co-design sessions. Go out and have your design team partner up with schools or with students if you're doing what I do or whatnot. be creative around how you collaborate with your users. Okay, and so this third section is about measuring trust. I am going to share these a little bit more as provocations. If we all agree you get what you measure, there's really two ways to do this. One is the direct approach. Would this work? Would this work? To put out to your teams, to your customers, do you trust blank? Blank is product name, blank is department, blank is leader, blank is individual. You could do this, of course, through engagement surveys, 360 reviews, through surveys, lots of ways to get at this question. Or another provocation is it better to do this indirectly? Is it better to actually try to understand what are the drivers that indicate the presence of trust? It could be authenticity, collaboration, value, communication. It could be other things too. Which one is going to be the best? And so now that you've ultimately defined trust, you've designed trust, we know how to measure trust, let's talk about the life cycle of trust. And so we start, as we said, by establishing trust with trustworthiness. This happens at the outset. You then, over time, have to earn trust using trustworthiness and assurances. You need to maintain trust through value, communication, authenticity, and collaboration. And depending on how that has gone, you may be in a position to either leverage the trust that you have earned from your coworkers, your partners, your teams, your users, or you will have to recover from trust that you have lost. Okay, in wrapping up, trust is foundational. This is not a nice to have. Trust is imperative. Trust can be achieved through value, communication, authenticity, and collaboration. You're looking at both trustworthiness at the outset, assurances over time, that you have to actively manage and measure trust. You can't do it once and be done. It never actually ends. And that when we do so, we will position ourselves as designers and as design leaders to not just do the things that we all want to do and have the jobs that we all want to have, but in fact totally flourish and ultimately lead. And so with that, thank you for trusting me with your time. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Trust can be quite a gray box, especially for us designers. That was a really amazing table that helps at least get us on the surface level of how we can better design for trust for our products and services. So if you've noticed, we are not doing Q&A anymore, so we are a little behind schedule. We still want to end at 12:45 for a lunch break, but the speakers will still be around, so you can catch them while they're grabbing lunch along with you and ask your questions.